The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been going on for 6 hours. Ambassador Choi Yuna sat quietly in the human section, watching as alien leaders argued in dozens of different languages. Their universal translators worked overtime to keep up with the panic. 3 more systems have fallen, announced Council Leader Veltar, his blue skin turning pale. The Vorthak Empire shows no signs of slowing down. Their bio-warriors destroyed our defense fleets in less than 4 hours. Yuna had seen the reports. Entire planets burned. Billions of aliens dead or enslaved. The Vorthak were not just conquering territory. They were wiping out everything in their path. "We need more soldiers," said General Kethvar from the Zilani Republic. "My people have sent everything we have. It is not enough." "Same with the Corvan Federation," added Admiral Hextall. "The Vorthak weapons are too advanced. Our shields cannot stop them." Veltar looked around the massive chamber. Representatives from 200 alien species filled the seats. All of them looked afraid. "What about the new members?" Veltar asked. "The humans joined us only 50 years ago. Do they have any military forces?" Several aliens made sounds that Yuna recognized as laughter. The Corvan Admiral shook his head. "The humans?" Hextall said. "They are a young species. They probably have a few thousand soldiers at most. Their technology is centuries behind ours." More laughter filled the chamber. Yuna stayed quiet. She had specific instructions from Earth about what to say and when to say it. "Perhaps they could provide support roles," suggested another alien. "Supply ships or medical aid." Veltar nodded. "Very well. Ambassador Choi, can your people contribute anything to our defense efforts?" Yuna stood up slowly. The chamber fell silent as hundreds of alien eyes focused on her. She was small compared to most species in the room, but she did not feel intimidated. "Earth will provide military assistance," she said simply. "How many troops can you send?" asked Kethvar. "A few thousand. Maybe 10,000 if you really try." Yuna smiled. "We will send what is needed." "That is not an answer," Hextall said with irritation. "We need exact numbers for planning." "The exact number depends on how many answer the call," Yuna replied. "But I can tell you this. Earth is activating the Forever Protocol." The aliens looked confused. They had never heard this term before. "What is this Forever Protocol?" Veltar asked. "You will see," Yuna said. "Give us 1 month." Back on Earth, Lee Hyun was working in his small garden when the message came. At 89 years old, his body was weak and his hands shook, but his mind was still sharp. He had been expecting this call for years. The holographic display showed a young officer in Earth military uniform. "Mr. Lee, this is Colonel Park from Earth Defense Command. We are activating the Forever Protocol. Are you willing to serve again?" Lee set down his gardening tools and looked at the message for a long moment. He thought about the wars he had fought in, the friends he had lost, the promises he had made to never pick up a weapon again. Then he thought about the reports from space. Billions of innocent people dying, children crying for parents who would never come home. "I am willing," he said. "Excellent, sir. Please report to Seoul Medical Center tomorrow at 800 hours. Bring nothing except your military records." Lee nodded and the message ended. He looked at his garden one more time, then went inside to find his old uniform. Across the planet, millions of similar conversations were happening. Park Mina got the call while teaching her granddaughter how to ride a bicycle. She was 73 and had not worn a uniform in 30 years. But when Earth called, she answered. Kim Dae received his message while building a house for his nephew. His hands were steady despite his 68 years, and his mind still remembered every explosive technique he had ever learned. He put down his tools and headed home to pack. The Forever Protocol was humanity's greatest secret. For 200 years, Earth's medical technology had advanced far beyond what they shared with the galaxy. They could now reverse aging, heal any wound, and restore bodies to peak condition. But they only used it for one purpose: bringing their veterans back to fight. The process took 3 weeks. Lee Hyun entered the medical center as a frail old man. He came out with the body of a 25-year-old soldier and the mind of someone who had fought in a dozen wars. His muscles were strong, his reflexes quick, but his eyes still held the wisdom of his years. "How do you feel, Commander?" asked the doctor. Lee looked at his young hands and felt his strong heartbeat. "Like I never left the service." All across Earth, the same process was happening. Soldiers who had fought in the Korean War were standing next to veterans of the Mars Rebellion. Men and women who had survived the outer colony conflicts were shaking hands with heroes from the asteroid mining wars. For the first time in human history, every living veteran was being called to serve at the same time. General Xin Wu stood before the assembled army and felt pride fill his chest. Millions of soldiers stretched out before him in perfect formation. Some had been fighting wars for over a century. Others were younger but just as experienced. "Soldiers," he said, his voice carrying across the vast assembly ground. "The galaxy needs us, not as the young species they think we are, but as the warriors we have always been." The response was a roar that shook the ground, millions of voices calling out their readiness to fight. Meanwhile, the transport ships were loading. The aliens had sent vessels designed to carry a few thousand troops. Instead, they watched in growing confusion as ship after ship filled with human soldiers. Captain Park Mina stood on the bridge of the lead transport, looking at the star charts. She had studied the enemy reports and was already forming battle plans in her mind. "Ma'am," said a young communications officer, "the aliens are asking how many more ships we need." Mina smiled. "Tell them we are just getting started." In space, the alien transport captains were sending panicked messages to their governments. "There must be some mistake," radioed Captain Zolketh to his command. "The humans said they were sending troops, but we have loaded 3 million soldiers and they say they are not done yet." 3 million? Came the shocked reply. "That cannot be right. Check your numbers." "I have checked them 6 times, Zolketh replied. "And they keep asking for more ships." By the end of the week, the alien fleets had transported 12 million human soldiers. The numbers made no sense to the galactic military leaders. Earth was supposed to be a small, peaceful world with limited military capabilities. Instead, they were seeing an army larger than most species could field in their entire history. Ambassador Choi Yuna received daily reports from the transport fleets. Each message showed more confusion from the alien commanders. "They still do not understand," she said to her aide. "Should we explain?" The aide asked. "No," Yuna replied. "Let them learn by watching. Sometimes the best lessons come from experience." On the lead transport ship, Commander Lee Hyun was meeting with the other human commanders. Maps and tactical displays covered every surface of the briefing room. "The aliens fight like they are playing a game," said Colonel Bei Jin, studying enemy movement patterns. "They follow rules. They try to minimize casualties. They fight to win battles." "And the Vorthak?" asked Sergeant Kim Dae. "They fight to destroy everything," Bei replied. "No rules, no mercy. They understand what war really is." Lee nodded. "Then we will show the galaxy what humans learned about war. We will show them what happens when a species that perfected killing finally finds something worth protecting." The ships jumped to hyperspace, carrying humanity's greatest army toward their first galactic war. Behind them, Earth's military factories were already building more ships and calling up more veterans. The galaxy was about to learn what a human veteran army truly was. Kepler Prime was supposed to be a quiet staging world. The aliens had built it as a safe place to organize their military forces before sending them to fight the Vorthak. Large barracks, training grounds, and command centers covered the planet's surface. General Kethvar stood on the main landing platform, waiting for the human transports to arrive. He expected to see a few small ships carrying maybe 10,000 troops. Instead, his sensors showed hundreds of massive vessels approaching the planet. "Sir," said his aide, a young Zilani officer named Teklar, "the human fleet is much larger than expected." "How much larger?" Kethavar asked. "They have over 400 transport ships, sir, and they are all full." Kethavar felt his stomach drop. "That is impossible. Run the scans again." But the scans were correct. As the first human ships landed, Kethavar watched thousands of soldiers march out in perfect formation. "Then thousands more. Then thousands more. How many are there?" he whispered. 12 million, sir," Tekla replied. "And more ships are still arriving." The human soldiers were different from anything Kethavar had seen before. They moved with complete confidence, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. Their equipment was simple but well maintained. Most importantly, they acted like they had done this many times before. At the head of the formation walked General Xin Wu. He was tall for a human, with gray hair and calm eyes. When he saluted Kethavar, it was with the precise movement of someone who had been a soldier for decades. "General Kethavar," Xin said, "thank you for providing staging facilities. Where would you like us to set up our command post?" Kethavar stammered, We prepared housing for perhaps 20,000 troops. You have brought 60 times that number." We brought what was needed, Shin replied. My soldiers can make their own shelter. We just need space to organize our units. Within hours, the humans had transformed Kepler Prime. What had been empty fields were now organized camps with clear defensive positions. The humans worked with efficiency that amazed the alien observers. Colonel Bei Jin was setting up the intelligence center when Lieutenant Nam Sol approached with a data pad. Sir, the alien commanders want to integrate our forces with theirs, Nam said. They have prepared positions for our troops in their existing units. Bei looked up from his maps. How many humans per alien unit? About 50 per battalion, sir. They want to spread us out across their entire army. Bei almost smiled. Tell them we appreciate the offer. But humans work better in human units. We will coordinate with their forces, but we fight as we were trained. Nam hesitated. Sir, they seem to think they are in command of all forces on this world. Then they need to learn something about human military structure, Bei replied. We came here to help them, not to follow their orders. The first real shock came during training exercises. The aliens had planned simple drills to test unit coordination. Instead, they watched the humans demonstrate tactics they had never seen before. Major Yun Tae was leading a simulated assault on a fortified position. The alien observers expected a direct attack, the way galactic armies always fought. Instead, Yun divided his force into multiple groups. First squad will create a diversion on the eastern wall, he explained to the watching aliens. Second squad will use explosives to create a new entrance on the north side. Third squad will go through the sewers and attack from inside. Sewers? Asked Captain Hextall. That is not honorable combat. Yun looked at him with confusion. We are not trying to be honorable. We are trying to win. The exercise began. The aliens defending the mock fortress expected the humans to attack the main gate, as their own forces would do. Instead, explosions erupted from 3 different directions at once. Before the defenders could react, human soldiers were inside their position, capturing objectives and taking prisoners. The entire assault took less than 15 minutes. This is not how warfare is conducted, protested Admiral Velkoth. You did not give the defenders time to organize a proper response. In real combat, the enemy does not wait for you to organize, replied Staff Sergeant Ohana. They die or we die. There is no in-between. That night, the alien commanders held an emergency meeting. General Kethvar looked around the room at his fellow officers, all of them wearing expressions of confusion and concern. The humans fight like barbarians, said Admiral Velkoth. They use dirty tricks and show no respect for proper military protocol. But they win, pointed out Colonel Zekthal. Every exercise, every simulation, they win. Winning is not everything, Velkoth argued. How we fight matters just as much as whether we win. Kethvar was not so sure. He had read the reports from the front lines. Honorable galactic armies were dying by the millions. Maybe it was time to try something different. The next day brought another surprise. Private First Class Kang Su was demonstrating human small unit tactics to a group of alien soldiers. The lesson was supposed to be simple: how to move through urban terrain. When entering a building, never go through the front door, Kang explained. The enemy expects that. Go through a window or make a new door with explosives. A young Corvan soldier raised his hand. But what if there are civilians inside? Then you clear them out first or you find another way in, Kang replied. Human rule number 1, protect innocent people. Human rule number 2, complete the mission. Human rule number 3, survive to fight another day. What if those rules conflict? The alien asked. Kang thought for a moment. Then you get creative. Humans are very good at finding new solutions to old problems. To demonstrate, he set up a simulation where the objective was inside a building full of civilian refugees. The alien students prepared to call off the mission as their training taught them. Instead, Kang showed them how to evacuate the civilians through the back while creating a diversion at the front. By the time the mock enemy realized what was happening, the objective was secured and the innocents were safe. You planned for everything, marveled the Corvan soldier. We planned for many things, Kang corrected. But in combat, you must be ready to change plans quickly. That is what separates veterans from new soldiers. The word veterans kept coming up in conversations with the humans. The aliens began to understand that these were not young soldiers fresh from training. These were experienced warriors who had fought in many conflicts. How many wars have your people fought? Kethavar asked General Shin during a planning meeting. Shin considered the question. On Earth? Thousands. In space? This is our first galactic war, but we fought several smaller conflicts in our own solar system. Thousands? Kethvar could barely believe it. Humans are good at war, Shin said simply. We spent most of our history fighting each other. We learned to be very efficient at it. But you have peace now, Kethvar pointed out. Yes, because we learned that the best way to prevent war is to be so good at it that nobody wants to fight you, Shin replied. We achieved peace through strength, not through hoping our enemies would be reasonable. That evening, Captain Park Mina was leading a night infiltration exercise. Her team of 50 humans was supposed to capture an enemy command post defended by 500 aliens. The alien defenders had sensors, energy shields, and superior numbers. They were confident in their ability to detect and stop any attack. 6 hours later, Park and her team were sitting in the command post, drinking coffee and reading the defenders' tactical plans. How? Asked the bewildered alien commander. Our sensors detected nothing. Our guards saw nothing. That is because you were looking for an army, Park explained. We did not send an army. We sent individuals who worked together. Very different approach. She showed him the recordings of the assault. Small groups of humans had approached from dozens of different directions. Some crawled through drainage pipes. Others climbed walls using simple ropes. A few even disguised themselves as maintenance workers. But this is chaos, the alien protested. How did you coordinate without radio communications? Hand signals, prearranged timing, and lots of practice, Park replied. When you have been soldiers for decades, you learn to work together without talking. Word of these exercises spread throughout the alien military. Stories were told of humans who could appear and disappear like ghosts, who could turn any environment into a weapon, who seemed to think of warfare as an art form they had spent lifetimes perfecting. Some aliens were impressed. Others were disturbed. They fight like the Vorthak, worried Admiral Velkoth. No rules, no honor, no mercy. No, corrected General Kethvar. The Vorthak fight to destroy. The humans fight to win. There is a big difference. As proof, he pointed to the human treatment of prisoners during exercises. Every alien who was captured was treated with respect and care. The humans followed strict rules about protecting non-combatants and minimizing unnecessary damage. They are warriors, not monsters, Kethvar concluded. They just understand warfare better than we do. The final exercise was a large-scale battle simulation. 10,000 humans against 50,000 aliens in a mock planetary assault. The aliens had better technology, more soldiers in defensive positions. The battle lasted 18 hours. At the end, human forces controlled all major objectives and had captured 60% of the alien command structure. Thane 7 was supposed to be impossible to capture. The fortress world had never fallen in 3,000 years of galactic warfare. Massive energy shields protected the planet from orbital bombardment. Underground bunkers housed millions of Vorthak warriors. The planet's surface was covered with automated defense turrets that could destroy entire fleets. War Prime Zethkal stood in his command center, deep beneath the planet's crust, watching the approaching Allied fleet on his displays. The Galactic Council had tried to take Thane 7 6 times in the past year. Each time their forces had been destroyed before they could even land troops. How many ships this time? He asked his aide. 800 vessels, War Prime, mostly transport ships carrying ground forces. Zethkal made a sound of disgust. The Council never learns. They think numbers will overcome superior strategy. What he did not know was that 5 million of the soldiers in those transports were human veterans. Major Yoon. Tay studied the tactical displays aboard the assault ship. The planet below looked like a metal ball covered in weapons. Every approach was covered by overlapping fields of fire. The energy shields would stop any bombing attack. Conventional assault would be suicide, observed Captain Hextall, the Corvin officer assigned to coordinate with human forces. Good thing we do not plan conventional assaults, Yoon replied. He turned to Staff Sergeant Ohana, who was examining geological surveys of the planet. What do you think, Sergeant? He asked. Hana pointed to several locations on the map. The shield generators are here, here, and here. All underground, all heavily defended. But look at these old mining tunnels. She highlighted a network of abandoned passages that ran beneath the shield facilities. The Vorthak sealed the tunnels 50 years ago, she continued. But the seals are designed to keep people out, not explosives in. Yoon smiled. How long to reach the generators? 12 hours if we move fast. 18 if we want to be quiet about it. We go quiet, Yoon decided. The longer they do not know we are there, the better. While Hana prepared her demolition team, other human units were making their own plans. The aliens watched in confusion as the humans ignored all standard assault protocols. Instead of massing for a direct attack, the humans split into hundreds of small teams. Some prepared to land on the planet's surface. Others loaded into stealth shuttles for covert insertion. A few groups were even planning to hide inside supply shipments that the Vorthak expected to receive. "This is madness," protested Admiral Velkoth. "You cannot take a fortress world with scattered raids." Colonel Beijin looked up from his planning table. "We are not trying to take the planet. We are trying to break it. What is the difference? When you take something, you have to hold it," Bei explained. "When you break something, you just have to make sure it cannot work anymore." The assault began at dawn. The Vorthak defenders were ready for a traditional attack. Waves of shuttles heading for landing zones, orbital bombardment of defensive positions, and massed infantry assaults on key objectives. Instead, the first sign of trouble was when several automated defense turrets simply stopped working. Hidden human teams had been crawling through maintenance tunnels all night, placing small explosive charges in critical systems. "Minor technical failures," reported the Vorthak duty officer. "Repair teams are responding, but the repair teams never reach their destinations." Private First Class Kangsu and his squad were waiting in the tunnel networks, ambushing any Vorthak who tried to fix the damaged systems. "Enemy contact in Sector 7, radioed a Vorthak patrol leader. Small group of aliens using tunnels to avoid our sensors." "How many?" asked the command center. "Unknown. They disappeared before we could get an accurate count." This was happening all across the planet. Small human teams appeared long enough to cause damage, then vanished back into the tunnel networks. Each attack was minor, but there were hundreds of them happening at the same time. War Prime Zethkol frowned at his tactical display. Red warning lights were appearing across the planet's surface, but none of them indicated major threats. "What are they doing?" he muttered. His question was answered 6 hours later when the first shield generator exploded. Staff Sergeant Hana had spent those 6 hours crawling through abandoned mining tunnels with 50 pounds of explosives strapped to her back. The passages were narrow, filled with toxic gases and guarded by automated security systems that the Vorthak had forgotten about. But Hana had been through worse. During the Outer Colony Wars, she had once spent 3 days hiding in a crashed spaceship while enemy forces searched for survivors. Sneaking through old tunnels was almost relaxing by comparison. When she reached the shield generator complex, she found exactly what she expected. Massive machines protected by thick armor and energy barriers, but no guards watching the maintenance tunnels beneath them. "Amateurs," she whispered as she planted her charges. The explosion that followed could be felt across half the planet. 1/3 of Thane 7's shields flickered and died. "Impossible," shouted Warprime Zethkol. "Those generators are buried beneath a kilometer of rock." "The tunnels, Warprime," his aide replied nervously. "They must have used the old mining tunnels. Those tunnels were sealed." "Yes, sir. But perhaps the seals were not strong enough to stop military-grade explosives." Before Zethkol could respond, the second shield generator exploded. Then the third. Within 20 minutes, Thane 7's legendary defenses were reduced to scattered local shields that covered only small areas. "All surface batteries, open fire on the Allied fleet," Zethkol ordered. But many of the surface batteries were no longer responding to commands. Human infiltration teams had been busy during the night, placing viruses in computer systems and cutting power cables. The great fortress world was slowly going blind and deaf. That was when the real assault began. Major Yoon Tae led the first wave of landing shuttles toward the planet's surface. With the shields down and many weapons offline, the Vorthak could not stop the human transports from reaching their targets. But instead of landing at obvious objectives like spaceports or command centers, the humans chose unexpected locations. Some landed in industrial districts. Others touched down in residential areas. A few even landed in garbage dumps and sewage treatment plants. "Where are they going?" demanded Warprime Zethkol. The answer became clear over the next few hours. The humans were not trying to capture strategic objectives. They were trying to paralyze the planet's entire infrastructure. Teams led by veterans like Sergeant Kim Dae attacked power plants, water treatment facilities, and communication networks. They did not try to hold these locations. They just damaged them enough to stop them from working, then moved on to the next target. "This is not how warfare is supposed to work," protested Colonel Velton, watching the chaos from orbit. "No," agreed General Shin Wu. "This is how warfare actually works when you are fighting to win instead of fighting to look good." By the end of the first day, Thane 7 was in chaos. The planetary shields were gone. Most automated defenses were offline. Power was failing across entire continents. The communication network was reduced to scattered radio transmissions. War Prime Zethkul tried to organize a counterattack, but his forces could not coordinate their movements. Every time he sent troops to recapture a critical facility, they found it already abandoned. "The humans had moved on to attack something else. They are everywhere and nowhere," reported one of his commanders. "We cannot pin them down long enough to fight them." "Then we use the underground bunkers," Zethkul decided. "Seal all entrances and wait for them to come to us." It was exactly what the humans wanted him to. Lieutenant Nam Sol was leading a team through the city subway tunnels when he received the order he had been waiting for. "All Vorthak forces have retreated to hardened positions," came the radio message. "Begin Phase 2. Nam smiled and activated his explosives pack. Around the planet, hundreds of other human teams were doing the same thing. The humans had not been randomly attacking infrastructure. They had been carefully studying the planet's underground networks, learning how everything was connected. Now they began cutting those connections in very specific ways. First, they destroyed the main power conduits that fed the underground bunkers. Then they collapsed tunnel sections to cut off supply routes. Finally, they began pumping various chemicals into the air systems. Not poisonous chemicals. The humans were very careful about that. Just things that made the air smell terrible and caused painful but harmless skin irritation. "Psychological warfare," explained Colonel Beijin to the watching alien officers. "We make their position so uncomfortable that they want to leave, but not so dangerous that they feel they have to fight to the death." Within hours, Vorthak soldiers were abandoning their bunkers. They could not breathe properly, their skin was burning, and they had no power for their equipment. Staying underground felt like slow torture, but when they came to the surface, human snipers were waiting. Captain Park Mina had positioned her marksmen on rooftops and in concealed positions throughout the city. They did not try to kill every Vorthak who emerged. Instead, they targeted commanders and communication equipment. "Take out their leaders and their radios," she had instructed her teams.
"Make it impossible for them to organize."
The fall of Thane 7 changed everything. News of the impossible victory spread across the galaxy faster than light, carried by traders, refugees, and military messengers. For the first time in 2 years, species that had been preparing for extinction began to hope. Brigadier General Han Su stood in the command center of the battleship Seoul, studying star charts that showed the entire Vorthak Empire. Red markers indicated enemy strongholds. Blue markers showed liberated systems. The pattern was becoming clear. The humans were not just winning battles. They were dismantling an empire piece by piece. "Status report," Han requested from his staff. Colonel Lim A stepped forward with a data pad. 17 more systems have requested liberation assistance. The Corvan Federation wants us to retake their shipyards. The Zelani Republic is asking for help defending their capital world. And our forces? Spread across 43 systems, Lim replied. Each operation is proceeding according to plan, but we are running low on veteran commanders. Han nodded. This was the problem with human military doctrine. It required experienced leaders who could adapt quickly to changing situations. Earth had many veterans, but the galaxy was a big place. Time to start training the aliens, he decided. Master Sergeant Jian Ho was already working on that problem. On the training world of Kepler Prime, he had established the first galactic military academy, based on human warfare principles. Today we learn about combined arms tactics, John announced to his class of 200 alien officers. Who can tell me why humans use different types of weapons in the same battle? A young Corvan captain raised his hand. Because different weapons are good at different things? Correct but incomplete, John replied. Captain Park, give me a better answer. Park Mina's voice came from the back of the classroom where she was observing the lesson. Because the enemy cannot prepare for everything at once. If you attack with only infantry, they use machine guns. If you attack with only tanks, they use anti-tank weapons. But if you attack with infantry, tanks, aircraft, and artillery all working together, they cannot counter everything. Exactly, John said. This is why human armies are organized the way they are. Every unit contains multiple capabilities. He turned to the tactical display and showed footage from recent battles. Watch this engagement on Vega Prime, he said. The Vorthak had prepared for our usual infiltration tactics. They sealed all tunnels, placed sensors everywhere, and kept their forces mobile. The display showed human forces approaching a heavily defended city. So, we did something different. We used orbital bombardment to create smoke and dust. Then we sent in airborne troops while the defenders were blinded. Ground forces attacked from the opposite direction. Artillery kept enemy reinforcements pinned down. And special operations teams captured their command posts. An alien student looked confused. But that is 4 different attacks happening at the same time. Exactly, John replied. 1 attack is a battle. 4 coordinated attacks is warfare. This lesson was being repeated across the galaxy as human veterans shared their knowledge with alien forces. The results were immediate and dramatic. On Proxima Station, Zalani troops used human small unit tactics to clear Vorthak boarding parties from their space station in 6 hours instead of the usual 6 days. In the Rigel system, Corvin pilots flying with human wingmen achieved kill ratios that their species had never seen before. On the frontier world of New Athens, a mixed human-alien garrison held off a Vorthak assault, forced 10 times their size by using defensive strategies, developed during Earth's ancient siege warfare. But the most important change was happening in the minds of Galactic military, Leaders Council Prime. Veltar stood in the Galactic Council chambers, looking at battle reports that would have been impossible 6 months ago. The humans have retaken 47 systems in the past month, he announced to the assembled representatives. Vorthak forces are retreating on all fronts. How is this possible? Asked Admiral Hextall. 6 months ago, we were losing 3 systems per week. The humans taught us something we had forgotten, Veltar replied. War is not about having the best weapons or the most soldiers. It is about using what you have more effectively than your enemy uses what they have. The proof of this was evident in every battle report. Human forces consistently defeated larger Vorthak armies by using superior tactics, better coordination, and more aggressive leadership. But the Vorthak Empire was learning too. War Master Kethjol stood before the Supreme Council of the Vorthak Empire, his bio-enhanced body showing signs of stress that his species rarely experienced. The humans fight differently from any species we have encountered, he reported. They do not follow predictable patterns. They adapt their tactics to each situation, and they seem to accept casualties that would cause other species to retreat. Casualties? Asked Supreme War Prime Velnoth. How many humans have died in these battles? That is the disturbing part, Kethzol replied. Their casualty rates are actually lower than ours. They achieve victory with fewer losses, not more. Explain. Kethzol activated a tactical display showing the battle for Centauri 7. Our forces numbered 800,000. The human-led coalition had 400,000. By all logic, we should have won through superior numbers. What happened? The humans divided our forces by attacking 15 different objectives simultaneously. We could not concentrate our strength because we did not know which attacks were real and which were diversions. By the time we realized their main target was the orbital defense platform, they had already captured it. Velnoth studied the display with growing concern. They used our strength against us. Yes, Supreme War Prime. And they are teaching these tactics to other species. Every battle now feels like fighting against 100 different human armies. This was exactly what Brigadier General Han Su had intended. Human military doctrine was spreading throughout the galaxy like a virus, transforming every allied army it touched. The effects were visible in ways beyond simple battlefield victories. Captain Lim A crouched in the ruins of a Vorthak supply depot, watching her mixed human-alien strike team prepare for extraction. The mission had been a complete success. They had destroyed enough supplies to cripple Vorthak operations in 3 systems. Remarkable, said Lieutenant Kexval, a Zalani officer who had volunteered for the mission. 6 months ago, my people would never have attempted such a deep strike behind enemy lines. Why not? Asked Lim. Too risky. Too many variables. Too much chance of failure. And now? Kexval checked his weapon and smiled. Now we understand that the biggest risk is letting the enemy think they are safe. This attitude shift was happening across the galaxy. Species that had spent centuries fighting defensive wars were suddenly launching aggressive campaigns. Armies that had always relied on superior technology were learning to outthink their enemies. The Vorthak Empire, which had conquered half the galaxy through overwhelming force, found itself facing opponents who refused to fight on Vorthak terms. But the most important lesson was about acceptable losses. Colonel Bei Jin stood in a field hospital on liberated Kepler-4, watching human and alien medics work together to save wounded soldiers. The casualties from the latest operation had been heavy. 300 dead, 800 wounded. Was it worth it? Asked Dr. Yelthar, a Corvan physician who had never seen such losses before. Bei looked through the window at the city beyond. Millions of civilians were celebrating their freedom from Vorthak occupation. Children who had hidden in bunkers for months were playing in the streets again. In galactic warfare, you try to minimize casualties, Bei said quietly. In human warfare, you try to minimize suffering. Sometimes those are the same thing. Sometimes they are not. I do not understand the difference. If we had been unwilling to accept these losses, this planet would still be under Vorthak control. Those children would still be hiding. That is suffering too, and it would have lasted much longer. Dr. Yelthar looked at the celebrating crowds, then back at the wounded soldiers. You calculate pain differently than we do, he observed. We calculate victory differently, Bei corrected. We learned long ago that the shortest war is usually the kindest war. This philosophy was reshaping galactic military thinking. Instead of fighting endless defensive campaigns that protected resources while populations suffered, Allied forces were launching costly but decisive offensives that ended conflicts quickly. The results spoke for themselves. Systems that had been under Vorthak occupation for years were being liberated in weeks. Refugee camps were emptying as civilians returned to their homes. For the first time since the war began, the galaxy's population was growing instead of shrinking. But success came with a price that went beyond casualties. Master Sergeant John Ho finished his latest training session and walked to his quarters, feeling older than his restored body suggested. Teaching alien officers was rewarding work, but it was also exhausting. Another successful class, observed Lieutenant Namsol, who had been helping with the training program. Yes, but I sometimes wonder what we are creating, John replied. Sir, we are teaching the galaxy how to wage war the way humans do. But humans learned these skills through centuries of fighting each other. What happens when this war is over and all these species know how to fight like us? The Vorthak Empire died not with a single decisive battle, but with 1,000 small defeats that drained away its will to fight. Fleet Admiral Quan Min stood on the bridge of the battleship Incheon, watching the last Vorthak warship surrender in the ruins of their capital system. 3 years of war had ended not in a massive final confrontation, but in exhausted enemies laying down their weapons because they could no longer see a path to victory. Sir, reported Captain Lee Sung, Supreme War Prime Velnoth is requesting terms of surrender. Quan looked at the tactical display showing the scattered remains of what had once been the galaxy's most feared military force. Broken ships drifted among the wreckage of orbital fortresses. Entire fleets that had terrorized star systems for decades were now fleeing toward neutral space, hoping for asylum. Tell him we will accept nothing less than unconditional surrender, Quan replied. But also tell him that human forces guarantee the safety of all Vorthak personnel who lay down their weapons. This was the human way of war, complete victory combined with mercy for the defeated. It was a concept that many species still struggled to understand. The formal surrender ceremony took place on the neutral world of Centauri Station, with representatives from every galactic species in attendance. Supreme War Prime Velnoth, once the terror of 3 sectors, looked like a broken old creature as he signed the documents that ended his empire. How? He asked Fleet Admiral Quan as the ceremony concluded. How did your species learn to fight so effectively? Quan considered the question carefully. Around them, alien diplomats were celebrating the end of the war, but the human admiral felt only tired satisfaction. We learned by making every mistake it is possible to make, he said finally. Your species conquered through strength. Ours survived by learning from failure. But you won every battle, Velnoth protested. No, Quan corrected. We lost many battles, but we won the war because we learned something from each defeat. You fought the same way for centuries. We adapted every day, it was true, Human forces had suffered dozens of tactical defeats during the war, but each loss had taught them something new about Vorthak capabilities. By the end, human commanders could predict enemy actions with uncanny accuracy. The victory celebrations lasted for weeks, but the real work was just beginning. Colonel Park J had been appointed to head the new Galactic Military Academy on Kepler Prime. His mission was to codify everything humans had learned about warfare and teach it to the next generation of galactic officers. Today we begin studying the most important subject in military science, he announced to his first class of 500 alien cadets. How to prevent wars. A young Zalani student raised her hand. Sir, I thought this was a military academy. Should we not be learning how to fight wars? Anyone can learn to fight, Park replied. That is the easy part. The hard part is knowing when not to fight and how to make your enemies choose peace instead of war. He activated a holographic display showing Earth's history. My species fought wars for thousands of years. We became very good at it, but eventually we realized that being good at war was not enough. We had to become good at peace. How? Asked another student. By making war so terrible that nobody wanted to fight us, Park explained. We developed weapons that could destroy our entire planet. Then we made sure everyone knew we had them. Suddenly, negotiation became much more attractive than combat. This lesson was being taught throughout the galaxy as human military advisors worked with local governments to establish new defense policies. The goal was not to create armies that could win wars, but armies that were so effective that wars would not start. The results were already visible. Species that had been enemies for centuries were signing peace treaties rather than risk facing human-trained forces. Trade routes that had been closed for decades were reopening. The galaxy was experiencing the longest period of peace in recorded history, but not all the changes were positive. Diplomat Song Hee sat in her office in the Galactic Council building, reading reports that worried her. Across the galaxy, military spending was increasing. Species were adopting human military doctrines and organizational structures. Arms manufacturers were working overtime to produce weapons based on human designs. We won the war, she said to her aide, but we may have lost the peace. What do you mean, ma'am? Look at these reports, Song said, spreading data pads across her desk. The Zalani Republic has tripled their military budget. The Corvan Federation is building new warships using human technology. Even peaceful species like the Altarians are establishing standing armies. Is that not good? They can defend themselves now. Against what? Song asked. The Vorthak Empire is gone. There are no major threats left in the galaxy. So why is everyone building armies? The answer came from her military advisor, Colonel Bei Jin, who had been listening to the conversation. Because they learned what we taught them, he said quietly, that the best way to ensure peace is to be ready for war. But taken to extremes, that philosophy can lead to arms races and preventive wars, Song pointed out. Yes, Bei agreed. That is why we need to teach them the rest of the lesson. The rest of the lesson became the focus of human diplomatic efforts throughout the galaxy. It was not enough to teach species how to fight effectively. They also needed to learn how to control their military forces and when to use restraint. Elder Sergeant Moon Dal had become something of a legend during the war. At 127 years old, he was the oldest human veteran to serve in the galactic conflict. Now he traveled from world to world, speaking to military academies and government officials about the true nature of warfare. Young officers always ask me about my greatest victory, he told a gathering on New Geneva. They expect me to describe some famous battle. Instead, I tell them about the war I prevented. He activated a holographic display showing the asteroid mining colonies of Earth's outer system. In 2387, there was a rebellion in the asteroid belt. Miners wanted independence from Earth. Politicians wanted to crush the rebellion with military force. I was ordered to lead the assault. The audience leaned forward, expecting to hear about a brilliant military campaign. Instead, I recommended that we negotiate. Moon continued. I told my superiors that the miners had legitimate grievances, and that military action would only create martyrs and prolong the conflict. What happened? Asked a young Corvan officer. We gave the miners what they wanted, limited self-government and better working conditions. The rebellion ended without a single shot being fired. That was my greatest victory, because it was a war that never happened. This philosophy was slowly spreading throughout the galaxy. carried by human veterans who understood that the ultimate goal of military force was to make its use unnecessary. But the most important changes were happening in the human veterans themselves. Commander Lee Hyun sat in his garden on Earth, tending to the same vegetables he had been growing before the war began. His body was young again thanks to the Forever Protocol, but his mind carried the weight of 3 years of galactic warfare. "Any regrets?" asked his granddaughter, who was visiting for the weekend. Lee considered the question as he worked the soil. "About the war? No, we did what was necessary to save billions of lives. About the changes we caused? That is more complicated." "What do you mean?" "We taught the galaxy how to wage war like humans," Lee explained. "But humans learned to be good at war because we had no choice. For other species, it was a choice. I wonder if we gave them a gift or a curse." Around the galaxy, similar conversations were happening as human veterans returned to civilian life. Some chose to remain in military service, helping to train alien forces and establish new defense protocols. Others returned to Earth to resume the peaceful lives they had left behind. But all of them carried the knowledge that they had fundamentally changed galactic civilization. The final assessment came from an unexpected source. 5 years after the war's end, former Supreme War Prime Velnoth published a book from his prison cell on a rehabilitation world. The work, titled The Human Way of War, became required reading at military academies throughout the galaxy. In it, he wrote, "I spent my life believing that strength was the only truth in the universe. The humans taught me that intelligence is stronger than strength, that adaptation is more powerful than technology, and that knowing when not to fight is the highest form of victory. They did not just defeat my empire, they showed the galaxy a better way to think about conflict. Whether that lesson will be remembered when the humans are gone, only time will tell." Ambassador Choi Yuna read those words in her retirement office on Earth, watching news reports from across the galaxy. Trade was flourishing. Diplomatic solutions were being found for conflicts that would once have led to war. The galactic military academies were teaching courses on negotiation, alongside classes on tactics. But military budgets continued to grow. New weapons were being developed, and occasionally she heard reports of species using human military doctrines to settle old scores. "Did we do the right thing?" she asked her husband over dinner. "We did the necessary thing," he replied. "Whether it was right will depend on what the galaxy does with what we taught them." On the military academy world of Kepler Prime, the question was being debated by the latest class of cadets